All right, so I'm finally able to get out here on the water today and do the casting video for the much anticipated Shimano SLX DC XT. I just wanted to say that for those of you who are looking for this reel to buy online, it's probably not going to be available for probably a couple more weeks, because I think the first batches usually always go to the Japanese customers and I guess the people who get their pre-orders in early enough. But I'm sure within a couple of weeks or so, more batches will be distributed out to the shops, so you can find one of these if you want to buy it. So the way I'm going to do this is, due to the fact that this reel right now currently is probably the second cheapest Shimano DC reel you can buy, hence a lot of people are going to be looking at it as their first DC reel, I'm going to be doing this video as kind of like a tutorial on how to set the reel up and what the line modes do. Now, there's a lot of chop on the water because there's like a steady wind coming straight into my face. So this is going to be pretty interesting to see what this DC reel can do in these conditions. Now, I have the reel mounted on my JDM Shimano Bantam 6'8" medium with 10-pound mono. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to choose my line mode. Now, since I have mono, I'm going to use the mono setting. So I turn the dial to open, flip this latch, pull the side plate off, and right now it's set to braid. So I'm going to use my thumb, flip that little arrow to the N or nylon for monofilament, and of course put the side plate back on. And we're going to start off in the wind mode since it is kind of windy right now. Alright, so now that I have my internal line mode picked out as well as my external dial setting picked out, we're going to set the spool tension. Now, it came from the factory pretty loose, so what I've done was I've tightened the spool tension to just have a slight bit of side-to-side play, just a hair, and that means we have a pretty fast fall on the lure. Now, this is what I recommend for all DC reels, possibly with the exception of the SLX and CURADO DC, the American versions. But we're going to start off with a pretty standard half-ounce topwater. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to just go through the line modes and back the brakes down as far as they'll go in each line mode to find a limit. So let's start casting. Alright, so even with wind mode, I'm probably getting at least 30 yards on the cast. And hopefully you guys can see the spool is flawless. There is no overrun, even casting into the wind, even though it's kind of calmed down a little bit. And we'll do one more. Now, the DC noise or the song or the whine or whatever you want to call it, it seems pretty loud on this particular reel. Kind of like it. Okay, so we're gonna go from the wind setting to number 4, and the wind just kicked up a little, so this should be interesting. All right, distance looked to be about the same. Hopefully you guys can see this thing landing out there, but had a couple of times there where I saw a couple of loops wanting to form, but they stopped. But once again, the wind has kicked up a little, so let's do a couple more casts. All right, so I put a little bit more effort into that cast, and it went out there, probably the longest cast yet, probably about 35 yards. All right, I don't know if you guys can hear it, but I can definitely feel the wind has kicked up considerably. We're gonna cast right into it. Zero problems. Now, I didn't stop the spool with my thumb, had a couple of little loops of backlash, but I would say the wind setting and the number 4 setting are pretty much interchangeable for the most part. And we'll do one more sidearm. And this lure's going out there. Now, I stated before, a lot of reels can be locked down to cast into the wind, but are they gonna still be able to get you distance like this? Probably not. Okay, so we're going to go into the number 3 setting. All right, guys, so you probably saw towards the, I guess, tail end of the cast, a couple of loops started forming, but luckily the cast was long enough that it sorted itself out. The brakes were able to do their thing. Let's do a sidearm. Damn, that was probably the longest cast yet. Probably close to 40 yards. Now, since the time I got this reel up until now, I haven't really looked at any of the YouTube videos on it, but I did read a Japanese blogger's impressions on this reel. And he said that this MGL3 spool gives it the, I guess, the effect of an elongated cast. Now, so far, I'm not sure if that's true, but I'll have to cast it side by side against another reel. But yeah, the wind is definitely kicking up. Let's see if the number 3 brake setting can handle it with an overhead cast. Oh shoot, it sure can. And this backlash was my fault. I was paying attention to the spool, not the lure, but kind of impressed that the number 3 brake setting could cast into this wind. All right, we'll do a couple more casts. Okay, wow, that's going out there well over 40 yards, and I didn't even put full effort into that cast. Now, in my opinion, even though this reel is one of the lightest DC reels ever, if not the lightest, it's still a bit heavy for me to do, I guess, a walking topwater bait or a jerk bait. But all right, we'll do one more, and then we're going to go down to the number 2 setting. All right, had a couple of loops puffing up there. Nothing major. All right, here's number 2. Now I have a feeling it's probably going to blow the spool up going this low, but let's find out. All right, so we had a pretty decent overrun that worked out, but the cast itself was not super impressive. Definitely not the longest cast yet. Let's cast over this way. Okay, now even doing the sidearm, there were some loops, but the backlashes are my fault. The overrun, the reel works out, but the backlashes after the lure lands, those are my fault. All right, we'll do one more in the number 2 brake setting. All right, so that cast was probably approaching 50 yards. And because of that, we're going to do one more. Now, since these casts are going out there a good bit, it's hard to time my thumb to stop the spool. All right, so just for educational purposes, we're going to go to the number 1 setting. And I know that this spool is going to blow up, but how bad will it blow up? Let's find out. Pretty bad. But luckily, it's not so bad that I can't pick it out. Now, I'm sure if I had a heavier topwater, let's say a 3/4 ounce, or maybe even an ounce, like one of those big evergreen shower blows, I could probably access this number 1 brake setting, but for a lure this light, it's just not enough brake. All right, so now we are gonna go into the fluorocarbon mode, which should be the most brake line mode of all 3 line modes. All right, there we go. And we're gonna start off with the wind mode. Now, fluorocarbon mode internally with wind mode externally should be the strongest brake setting for this reel without having to tighten up the spool tension any. So let's start casting. All right, yep, that's definitely the shortest cast yet, probably barely 30 yards. And the DC song, or the whine, is a little bit different. One more, we'll do a sidearm. In fact, even with the spool tension set loose like this, I might be able to cast without having to stop the spool with my thumb. Let's try that out. Yep, pretty much. So right there you can see why this is the strongest brake setting on this reel, as well as any of the Shimano DC reels that have the IDC5. All right, we'll do one more cast with no thumb. Okay, had a couple of small loops, but no problem. All right, let's switch it up to number 4 and see if we can do the same thing. See if we can go thumb free. Okay, nope, can't do thumb free on number 4. Distance looked to be about the same though. So if you're wanting to cast light lures, either the wind mode or the number 4 mode in any line mode setting is probably going to be your best bet. So now we're going to switch the external dial to 3. All right, distance was, I guess, decent. Definitely longer than number 4. All right, so did more of a line drive cast there. Probably got close to 40 yards. All right, let's go to number 2. All right, pretty long cast. Had a couple of small loops popping up here and there that got worked out by the brake system. Okay, we'll do one more. We'll do a sidearm. Okay, now let's see if we can cast in the number 1 external dial setting in fluorocarbon. Probably not, but it'll probably be better than it was in the monofilament mode. Here we go. Ooh, I was wrong. It was much better. And we actually got off a pretty clean cast there. So with that cast, I hope you guys see now why the fluorocarbon line setting is the, I guess, strongest brake mode of the IDC5 brake setting. Okay, so we're going to do one more cast, see if that last cast was a fluke or not. All right, so I cast it into, I guess, a tougher headwind than that last cast, and we did have a pretty decent overrun, nothing too bad. But yeah, this confirms fluorocarbon line mode gives you the strongest brakes. So now let's flip over into the braid mode. Okay, so let's flip this all the way over. Now braid is going to give us the least restrictive brakes, therefore the possibility of giving us the longest casts. And hopefully you guys can tell by now that with the IDC5 brake system, just because you're using monofilament doesn't mean you can't use the fluorocarbon mode or the braid mode. Now with the IDC4 system of the CURADO DC and the American SLX DC, I find that pretty much you got to stick with the line for each setting, but with the IDC5, that's not the case. All right, here we go. We are in the wind setting braid line mode. And there was a wind coming in. Cast wasn't that long, probably just under 30 yards, but the spool was perfect. Let's do a couple more. All right, just for fun, we're gonna do one and try to go thumb free. Ooh, I think it's gonna be bad. No, not that bad. But the reel is supremely comfortable to palm, supremely comfortable. And let's go to the number 4 brake setting. Okay, that was pretty far for the number 4 brake setting. But of course, we're in braid mode that has the weakest braking force. So let's go to 3. Okay, distance looked about the same. Now, of course, with these long barrel-shaped lures, each cast is going to be different how the lure flies through the air. But let's go to number 2. I think we're probably going to have some overrun in the number 2 external dial setting, but let's find out. Had a decent overrun at the beginning that worked itself out, and then hopefully you guys saw that there were a couple of loops towards the end of the cast that got worked out. But I'm surprised that we can access the number 2 brake setting without blowing up the spool. Okay, so the wind's kicked up, I can feel it. Let's see what happens. Nothing really. Now the spool backlash because I didn't stop it with my thumb when the lure hit the water, but that was pretty clean. Now it's been a minute since I've casted a DC reel, so I don't think this MGL spool is providing the benefits that you would get if you were using, I guess, the centrifugal SVS Infinity or the FTB Bait Finesse magnetic system, because those spools can get really, really light. All right, let's go to number 1. Now this is going to be a disaster because the wind has kicked up, but I just want to show you guys. Okay, so the number 1 external dial in braid mode is going to be your least amount of braking. That is as low as you can go on the brakes on this reel, which could be a hindrance if you're using, you know, a really heavy aerodynamic dense lure, but you would probably cast all the line off because you'd be using heavier line as well. So there we go, guys, the casting video for the quote-unquote new Shimano SLX DC XT. Now, is it anything new in the area of DC casting performance? I'm gonna say no. To me, it feels just like any other reel that has IDC5. It's just more comfortable to palm than pretty much all the other current DC reels, as well as being lighter as well. So if you thought the current crop of DC reels was too heavy for you or too big, then this reel just might be the one you're looking for. And once again, with the current exchange rate, this reel coming in at under 200 bucks, it is a steal. So I hope this helps out anyone who is looking to buy this reel and you're trying to figure out how to set it up with all the different internal line modes and external dial modes. It's really not that hard. It doesn't really matter what line you use. You can use any internal line mode you want, as long as you don't go too low on the external dial. All right, guys, thanks a lot.